During the 2010s, the world became infatuated with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Every movie studio under the sun wanted to have their own cinematic universe to compete with Marvel, and none were as prevalent as Marvel themselves. More specifically, a famous wall crawler. Marvel did not fully own the rights to Spider-Man. Sony did. So when Sony saw the cinematic universe trend happening in Hollywood, they knew they had to put their grubby little fingers on it. Their original plans were to use their new amazing Spider-Man franchise as a starting point to make all these movies about different Spider-Man side characters. However, due to the dumbest controversy I've ever seen involving Andrew Garfield, they pulled the plug on this universe and made a deal with Marvel to have Spider-Man show up in the MCU. You think after that they'd stop trying to make a cinematic universe, but they had an even worse idea for one. What if we made a Spider-Man cinematic universe without Spider-Man? And thus an abomination was born. Now, when you hear the idea of a Spider-Man cinematic universe without Spider-Man, you think that it would only last like one movie. But alas, you would be wrong. This somehow lasted 6 movies, and even one of the characters got a full trilogy. It is genuinely insane that this cinematic universe continued for as long as it did, with the fact that every single entry in this is terrible, at least in my opinion. I know the Venom films have their fans, but personally, I'm not a big fan of them. Though I do find some of these films ironically funny.
Your costume is amazing!
Thank you, one person!
I'm super critical of the Venom films in particular because Venom is my favorite Spider-Man side character, whether or not he's a villain or a hero in any interpretation. And my favorite thing about his character is his dichotomy with Spider-Man. He, like many other Spider-Man villains, is a dark mirror of what Peter Parker could have become. But what interests me the most about Eddie and the symbiote is the way that they've become a hero over time. They've done some really bad stuff, but in the end, they still want to do what's right for the world. And honestly, I find that very interesting. So you can tell my disinterest in the film when they immediately skip to him being a hero. And him, just in general, not having any Spider-Man connections at all. He doesn't even have the Spider-Man logo on him, which just feels wrong. It feels like he's naked. But I feel like my complaints are null and void, seeing to the fact that these films did very well. They had a full Venom trilogy without a single mention of Spider-Man. Well, kinda. There was an end credit scene in the film Let There Be Carnage teasing that Venom would fight Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and then that just didn't happen. So that's cool, thanks Sony. I'm still super pissed off that we never got a proper Spider-Man versus Venom fight on the big screen for such a long time, because I am still not a big fan of how they interpreted Venom in Spider-Man 3. I am crossing my fingers that by the time that we do adapt the Black Suit Spider-Man story for Tom Holland, which it seems like they're going that direction in the MCU, that they do a good job at it, but I'm not holding my hopes. Speaking of films that I had no hope for, Morbius!
It's Morbid time.
Morbius is definitely the worst film here. I know that there's a bunch of contention that the other films are worse, but I've never been so bored while watching a film than Morbius. Out of the many Spider-Man characters that they could have made a movie about, they picked Morbius, a character who does not have a lot of fans out there. When trailers started coming out for this movie, I completely forgot who Morbius is until I remembered that old Spider-Man the Animated Series episode. Even after I jogged my memory, I was like, who is this for? Who's fans of Morbius the Living Vampire? But Sony didn't care. They had Jared Leto signed onto the film, and they thought that that would be a guaranteed success. Everyone loves Jared Leto. He hasn't done anything bad at all. Next time that I see him, you have no idea what I'm gonna do to him. I don't think that it will surprise you that Morbius didn't do very well in the box office, but that didn't stop Morbius from becoming a meme online. Not because the film was good, but because people like making fun of bad movies. It also helped out that Morbius was such a blank slate of a character that people just rewrote him into whatever they felt like, thus we would get iconic lines as, "It's morbing time." It gets funnier when the internet gaslit Sony into re-releasing the film, making it think that this was this sleeper hit success just for the film to bomb again. Sony really is a very smart company that has done nothing stupid at all. Looking back at the whole Morbius debacle in present day, at the time of me recording this, the year 2025, it's really funny to look at. Having so much confidence in a D-list comic book character to make $1 billion or something was really funny in hindsight, but Sony didn't think that way. But as we know, Sony is a genius corporation, so they will never make the same mistake again. There's no way that they would give another D-list Spider-Man character their own solo film. Right? Right?
He was in the Amazon with my mom when she was researching spiders right before she died.
What the hell is that?
Ah, Madam Web, a project even more pointless than Morbius. You could tell that they were scrapping for ideas because Madam Web herself looks nothing like how she does in the comics. I already thought that it was insane that they were making a film about Morbius, but even more insane that they're making a film of Madam Web of all characters. And the reason why I think it's insane, because if you didn't know, Madam Web is both blind and can't walk. How do you turn that into a full movie? And the answer to that question is that you just ignore those parts and just make her a random woman. Cool. With that description of her character that I mentioned earlier, you understand why she's always just been a supporting character, never the main focus. There isn't much to go off of for a story involving her, but somehow they found a way to make one. And somehow it is worse than Morbius. Don't get me wrong, I prefer this movie over Morbius, but only because it is funny bad. Morbius is just boring, which I feel is worse than just being bad. But this film is not very well made. I mean, there's the obvious, such as in the first trailer having that infamous line about her mom in the Amazon, which, by the way, does not get mentioned at all in the movie. Like, there's a scene of her mom in the Amazon, but, like, nobody says this. Nobody says this line in particular. This was specifically added for the trailer. But for me, personally, I find it hilarious how the main villain's lines were dubbed over in post, and you can clearly tell that it was.
You have no idea of the torment and torture of dying over and over again.
I can't escape it. So I'm not gonna sit back and let it happen.
Also, I guess this is a spoiler, so I guess stop watching if you care about spoilers for Madam Web for some reason. But I find it hilarious that Madam Web has to earn being blind and unable to walk by the end of the film, which is so funny to me. It's so crazy, this trend in superhero movies where the character has to earn the right to be the character instead of just starting off the movie as that character. I am so happy that origin story movies are finished. If you notice, the trend with the last two movies is that they were films focused on characters that people don't really care about. So what happens if we go again with the Venom effect and picking a character that audiences will actually somewhat know? Well, then we get Kraven the Hunter.
The Kravinoff hit failed. All of our guys are dead.
Kraven is interesting in that it is the first of these projects where I actually had somewhat, and I mean like a really small amount of interest in the project. I love Kraven the Hunter. He's in like my top 5 favorite Spider-Man villains, and obviously I love the story Kraven's Last Hunt. It's a masterpiece. So obviously I had somewhat of an interest when I found out that they were going to be making a movie about him. I thought it would have been very interesting, but you know, with the results that Sony's been producing as of late, my hopes fell down real quickly. And was I right to doubt this film? Yes, Absolutely yes. The big problem with this movie, and that I also noticed with Morbius, is that they are afraid to make Kraven evil. They don't want you to not like Kraven, even though he is a bad guy. Even though this movie calls him Kraven the Hunter, he's a pacifist to animals, which is nothing like how he is in the comics. I will say, I do respect that they went for an R rating, which is very ballsy because most R-rated films do not do successful unless it's got a big IP attached to it. Still didn't save this movie from being bad, but I appreciate the effort. It really annoys me that they are doing these villain movies when there are other villain projects from other studios that do a way better job at expressing these characters, have them be the main characters while still keeping them bad guys. Both Agatha All Along and The Penguin are both shows about bad guys that still keep the bad guys while bad guys. But they're still interesting characters, and in fact still the main characters of the stories, while still being evil, because that's what makes their characters interesting. But these Spider-Man villain movies don't seem to understand that. They remove all the complexity from every character that this universe touches. I guess in reality, my complaining isn't just because recently they announced that this universe has come to a close. Well, more so, they backpedaled that this was even a universe to begin with and said that this was never meant to be a cinematic universe, even though it clearly was. The obvious holes being the fact that the Vulture from Spider-Man Homecoming shows up in the end credits scene for Morbius. And also at the end of the recent Venom movie, Venom the Last Dance, they had a big tease for Null, the symbiote god, as a big bad threat. Both of those scenes will now never get answers to them. I am honestly glad that this never happened because the future slate was looking pretty grim. They planned on making movies about Hypno Hustler and El Muerto, who, by the way, has only ever been in 2 comics total. There's also been debate on whether or not Spider-Man should be sold back to Disney, and I'm still conflicted on it. As much as I hate what Sony is doing with Spider-Man right now, I can't admit that they have done good for the character, and so far what Disney has produced with the rights to the character has been kind of middle of the road.
Mr. Campbell, I remembered I left something in the bathroom. Deuces. Parker out. Get out!
Honestly, I'm just gonna wait till Spider-Man becomes public domain and then I'll start making my own Spider-Man projects. There are other bad cinematic universes out there, but I think I can safely say that this is one of the worst ones out there. So what can we learn from this experience? Don't make bad movies. Ooh, it's end of video me back from the grave. Ooh. But hey, it's been a while since I last uploaded. I apologize for that, but I'm back now. I got a couple more video ideas, more superhero videos, more fighting games, more just in general game stuff, just things that I like, things that you're expecting from this channel. Was in a bit of a rut, but now I'm out of it, and there's a lot of exciting stuff coming to this channel, so stay tuned. But outside of that, I got nothing much to say, so be sure to like and subscribe, and have a good rest of your day.
It would be so awesome. It would be so cool.